Here's a full review of the CORTIS What We Want documentary, which feels very different from the usual pre-debut content we get in K-pop, because instead of a glossy highlight of training and rehearsals, it shows the group in a very raw and unfiltered way. And the focus isn't just on debut prep, but on how they actually work and clash and grow as young artists. And that distinction matters because plenty of groups in the industry are branded as the so-called self-producing idols. But the behind-the-scenes footage often skips past the messier parts of the process. But here, we see it all. Awkward trial and error, moments of doubt, and the challenge of trying to merge 5 creative voices together. And it doesn't feel staged. And that's what makes it, hit harder, I think. Now, from the start, HYBE frames CORTIS not only as performers, but as creators, because the members talk about wanting to be recognized as artists who can share stories in different ways. And the series, the documentary series, leans into that idea. And even before a title track exists, the documentary positions this group as musicians, a group of musicians actively shaping their own direction. And in that sense, I think this documentary isn't just about introducing personalities, it's rather about setting expectations about the process. And for a group this young, they are super young, being shown through that lens, I think it gives us an early look at both their potential and also possible challenges ahead. So let's talk about episode number 1. This one opens without fanfare. There's no flashy introduction, no stage roll call. It's just these members in the studio tossing around lyrics, joking about phrasing, and laughing through the work. And it feels less like, trainees rehearsing and more like just a group of friends hanging out. And this chemistry is picked up by the producers too, who call their chemistry insane and even describe their music as sounding like fashion. Like stylish, full of personality, and unlike anything else they had heard in K-pop. And that comment lands because it points to what really sets this group apart. Not just their skills, but the energy that they create together. And the vibe is playful, but they are serious in their own way. They are clearly enjoying the process, but you can also see the focus underneath. And that balance, lighthearted yet intentional at the same time, it makes these early scenes stand out. And this matters, once again, because it sets the tone for how the group works. Before we even learn about their backstories or see them being tested in the US song camp in LA, the series shows that CORTIS is built on interaction. And their sound and their ideas and even their clashes, like the conflicts, all of it grows out of this foundation of shared energy. Now, although the documentary introduces the group as a whole, episode 1 frames much of the story through Martin. So at just 16, these are the members, Martin becomes the main narrator, so to say, giving us both his personal background and a way to understand how CORTIS sees itself. So Martin's musical foundation is pretty unusual for someone his age. His dad installed FL Studio on his computer, which is a music software, when he was in elementary school, he says. And what began as a hobby eventually turned into serious songwriting. And by now, it's already credited on Tomorrow by Together, TXT's Deja Vu, and Eyelet's debut track, Magnetic. And that puts him in a very rare position. Like, he's already respected as a composer before even debuting as an idol. But that success also brings pressure because Martin admits it feels strange to be able to write songs for others, but not yet have a defining track for his own group. And that honesty makes his story more compelling. He isn't shown as a flawless flawless prodigy or something, but as someone still figuring out how to balance talent and expectations and teamwork. And in many ways, I think his narrative anchors episode number 1. Tying together the group's artistic vision with the reality of growing up inside it. Now, Martin doesn't carry the creative load alone. Much of the episode also highlights his dynamic with Songhyun, who joined the company at just 13. At first, trainee life felt casual to Songhyun, he said. Staying up late making music seemed more like hanging out than hard work. But over time, that energy solidified into determination. Now, he says, he truly wants this career. And the staff and producers frame the Martin and Songhyun duo as one of the group's creative engines. If Martin is the scholar, Songhyun is the natural. He throws out ideas that sound odd at first, but later become the unique hooks that give a track its character. Spring Boy and His Noise, for example, who are the producers for this group, both point to this dynamic as what makes their collaboration stand out. And their storytelling or songwriting process reflects that contrast. Songhyun writes directly from emotion. He gives an example from Joyride, one of their tracks on their EP, first EP. Like no sun, no sky, a ghostly pale face. That came straight from his instincts, he says. Martin, on the other hand, pushes those raw ideas further, shaping and refining them into structure. And these two members sometimes clash, of course, that happens, but the friction produces results. As Martin himself says, when he gets stuck, Songhyun is a person he turns to. And this partnership ends up being one of the strongest threads in episode 1, at least from my perspective, because it frames CORTIS not just as 5 individuals working in parallel, but as a group where opposing styles spark something greater. Their push and pull, and instinct and discipline, and raw and refined energies might prove central to the group's growth. These contrasting styles. Now, midway through episode 1, the story shifts. CORTIS prepares to leave for Los Angeles for their first overseas song camp. And the stakes rise immediately. Their manager reminds them that the official start date is June 24th, giving them only a few days to prepare. June 24th, 2024, I'm assuming. And the mission is clear. They aren't just experimenting abroad. They are expected to come back with a title track. And this change in setting changes the mood. Korea was all about familiar routines, but LA represents pressure, possibility, and a new level of professionalism. Several members admit they feel they need to show what they've got, not just to producers, but to themselves. And that excitement is real, but also the anxiety is also real, And the song camp becomes more than a backdrop. It symbolizes transition. CORTIS is no longer just a group with strong internal chemistry. Now they have to prove themselves in an environment where expectations are much higher and time is short and results are demanded. And it's the first time that the documentary frames them not only as trainees, but as professionals in training. Now, the sessions in Los Angeles highlight both highs and lows of collaboration. In the studio, they debate whether a beat feels too chill and experiment with tempo, and they test whether certain sounds feel trendy or dated. And out of this trial and error, one track in particular, which is Go, begins to stand out. And the excitement around that track shows how satisfying the process can be when everything clicks. But the documentary doesn't gloss over the friction. When it comes time to write lyrics, there are disagreements quickly escalating. I mean, it's a small disagreement, but still. Like a debate over whether a line should be about asking for forgiveness or stopping. It spirals into an argument with members talking over one another in semi-frustration. And what looks like a simple detail exposes the challenge, aligning 5 distinctive voices into one. And producer feedback adds another layer of pressure. Like for example, after meetings with Spring Boy and His Noise, Martin admits that he lost confidence. And even for someone with credits to his name, outside expectation can shake stability, this shows. What's important though is how the documentary frames these moments. Instead of treating arguments or doubts as failure, it presents them as part of the process. Like the stubbornness or the raised voices or the self-questioning, they are signs of how deeply the members care about getting it right. And for teenagers being asked to act as both idols and creative professionals, I think these struggles really show what it really means to build music together. And the takeaway is balance. The thrill of discovery on one hand and the grind of compromise on the other. And CORTIS is not portrayed as a group that gets everything right from the start, but as a group learning in real time through mistakes, disagreements, and breakthroughs. Now, episode 2. This one shifts the focus from songwriting to performance, and it begins with James. He explains that his biggest satisfaction comes when audiences notice the exact detail he wanted them to notice, like when they recognize a highlight move that he built into the choreography, for example. Even before debut, James has contributed to choreography for TXT's Deja Vu and Eyelid's Magnetic, just like Martin, showing how involved he already is in HYBE's creative network. And from the outside, James may seem like the group's playful member, but the documentary reveals how his looseness feeds creativity. Like for example, Kenho might suggest an unusual move, and James refines it into something stylish and stage ready. And the process isn't about memorizing steps. It's about reshaping raw ideas until they feel distinctively like CORTIS. And a breakthrough moment comes when the group unanimously agrees on James' move for the line, "I just gotta get it, watch me go," from the track Go. And yeah, this consensus highlights their progress because they're beginning to align not just musically, but also visually, creating a performance language of their own. And the key takeaway here is ownership. James isn't interested in simply executing choreography handed down from others. He wants the performance to carry CORTIS color and image, something that fans can instantly recognize as theirs. And for a pre-debut group, that's a pretty significant thing, I feel like. And from there, the episode moves to the first music video shoot for Go. And, these behind the scenes footage, I quite, love them. Because if they're not polished, and it's not about polished final products, but it's all about, trial and error, repeated takes, and constant adjustments. And this links back to James' philosophy. The shoot isn't just about capturing moves on camera, but about using performance to showcase the song's essence and the group's unique character. And even in the messiness, you can see their intention to craft something that feels, really theirs, uniquely theirs. And if episode 1 was all about the thrill of arriving in LA, this one captures the weight of expectation. So CORTIS sessions now involve established artists like Juicy J. And for teenagers who are just making music in bedrooms just a few years ago, this could be pretty surreal. But the excitement of high-profile collaborations quickly collides with reality because they still don't have a title track. And they get some blunt feedback, like some songs are too pop and others don't fit the group's direction. And the frustration is pretty visible. Like they admit that they once aimed to write one song a day, but now they realize, the real challenge is crafting music that feels like them. And that shift from productivity to being authentic, it shows their growing awareness of identity. And by the end of this stretch, they are exhausted. Yeah, there we go. These guys are exhausted and they're discouraged. Yet the documentary frames it as progress, not failure, but bit by bit movement toward finding their own sound. And there's a turning point that comes when the group is told that they'll be working with Internet Money, especially Taz and Rio from Internet Money, without HYBE's usual producers present in the same room, like His Noise and Spring Boy. I don't know what they were doing at the time, but that was what they were told. And that lack of a safety net, so to say, forces them to step up and manage the session themselves. And if, they toss around like beats and half-formed ideas, but gradually something shifts and they start bouncing keywords, building on each other's thoughts, and keeping momentum alive. So they begin functioning like a unit. And the A&R staff also notices this, and they praise the way these members huddle together and organize ideas. And yeah, they really managed to sound cohesive, more like a single group rather than 5 individuals pulling in different directions. So that was pretty impressive and great to see. Now, the episode ends with a lighter, self-directed project, which is filming their own music video for Lullaby. The song itself is described as emotionless rather than being sad, and the video reflects that detached mood with simple props and one-take shots. And it was very notable how the members talked about this. Instead of chasing polish products, they frame it as an experiment in finding their style. By saying something like, we wanted it to be even more natural, and we just wanted it to do things our own way. And JUHOON closes this episode by saying that he finally understands what it means to call something our song. And that reflection ties the episode together, showing that authenticity isn't something handed down by producers, but something they discover through trial, through play, and through ownership. Now, episode 3 opens with KEONHO, shifting the tone from process to personality. Unlike Martin and James, who are defined through music and choreography, KEONHO is introduced through his past as a swimmer. And he recalls the feeling of diving in and being completely wrapped by water. And he describes competition as something that felt fun rather than stressful. And I think this gives us a glimpse into his character, someone who enjoys challenge, but doesn't overcomplicate it, so to say. And his members also reflect this view. Like, they describe him as flexible, agreeable, and easy to work with, but also as someone with a uniquely charming voice that no one else can copy. And for a big hits A&R team, that authenticity matters more than surface level traits. And they stress that sincerity and love for music are what will make CORTIS connect with the public. And I think KEONHO embodies that value in that context. And from there, the episode shifts to preparations for the Joyride music video. And the tone is pretty looser than the intense song camp discussions. It's playful, but also thoughtful, though. The members debate whether to build a full storyline or simply capture themselves in candid and natural moments. And the consensus leans toward authenticity, less acting, more atmosphere. And they want the visuals to match the song's live wild and play wild message. And they chose Griffith Observatory as a filming location, and it's a wide and open view of Los Angeles that could reflect a sense of possibility and freedom that they're trying to express through the song. And this part of the episode highlights a growing confidence, because earlier the group often looked to outside producers for direction, but here they're beginning to articulate their own vision, not just for music but for visuals and mood as well. And one of the episode's highlights is their session with AG Club, which is a hip-hop collective from San Francisco that CORTIS members already admired. And the collaboration, this one, isn't heavily planned. The AG Club drove down 8 hours to meet them in Los Angeles, according to the Big Hit staff. But the vibe is instantly natural. And unlike the high-pressure sessions with established producers, this one feels playful and spontaneous. And the members do freestyle, experiment with whistles and live instruments, and they bounce ideas in real time. And I really enjoyed this scene. And AG Club members also complimented CORTIS, saying they weren't at that level when they were young. So yeah, I really love the chemistry during the scene. And now, after this scene, we see producers at Big Hit talking about the track called Evolve as a potential title track. It's fresh, it's authentic, and feels aligned with who CORTIS are becoming. But within the group, though, there are some disagreements. For example, Martin argues that while the track suits the group, it might lack the punch that is needed for a lead single. James, on the other hand, he worries that pairing the track with another track like would make their setlist feel flat. And the debate reveals a deeper challenge, aligning external validation with internal conviction. And the company believes the song might work, but the members don't feel fully convinced. And for them, the question, once again, isn't just whether a certain track is good, it's whether it defines them. So as the song camp nears the end, the members are getting tired. They met top producers and creating multiple tracks, but the group still doesn't have a clear title track. And they said things like, we've only been meeting hit producers, but we still don't have it. That means the problem is us. And yeah, that's a very honest admission of responsibility. And it really highlights the pressure that they're under. External help can only go so far if the group itself isn't ready to commit to a sound. And in the end, they return to Korea with experiences and half-finished songs. But, so that's actually, where are we? Yeah, so they return to Korea, and the episode closes on that unresolved note. They have some progress, but no breakthrough. So it sets up the stakes for what comes next. Episode 4 begins with JUHOON. And this one also pretty special. Unlike Martin and James or KEONHO, who are framed through creative process or personality, JUHOON's entry focuses on choice. So he was a former child model with multiple casting offers, and he admits that he weighed stability against passion before deciding, saying you could only live once. And that line really captures his role in CORTIS, because he is someone who is steady and practical, but quietly bold when it counts. Let's see. And Big Hit staff also describe him as a missing puzzle piece, like his trendy, versatile, and intelligence. And his group mates call him a rock, calm, persistent, and fast at picking things up. And what makes his influence stand out is that it isn't loud. Even though he joined relatively late, his consistency and passion pushed the group forward, sometimes even making the others reflect on whether they're doing enough themselves. So in a team full of raw talent and bold energy, JUHOON is portrayed as a quiet anchor. And from JUHOON's introduction, the episode moves back to the aftermath of the first US song camp. So the frustration from episode 3 still lingers. Like Martin admits that the process left him confused. Like everyone kept asking what a title track should feel like, but no one had an answer. And a listening session becomes a turning point though. It was originally meant for staff and producers, but Martin insists on joining. And his reason is that he doesn't just want to perform the music, he wants to help shape it. So by putting himself forward as a kind of producer leader, Martin signals both ambition and responsibility. And soon after, the staff delivered big news. The group will return to the US for a second camp, and this time it's much shorter but more intense. And unlike the first trip, which was about exposure and learning, the second is framed as refinement and an opportunity to address what was missing and define their identity more clearly. And the difference is clear from the start. Where the first camp often felt scattered, the second one carries more purpose. And the members arrive with the goal of bringing at least one song to life. And for Martin, the camp marked a personal shift. He confesses that he disliked most of what he produced during the first trip, but here he feels improvement. Sequencing full tracks, experimenting with energy, and gaining confidence as a creator. And it's a subtle but important turning point, showing that growth isn't always visible day to day, but it accumulates. And the group dynamics also feel stronger. There are scenes of the members layering claps, stomps, and chants, and it shows how they have learned to channel playfulness into something that drives the session forward. And staff and producers notice the difference too, remarking that they are starting to see the path little by little. Now, the breakthrough arrives with the track What You Want. From the first listen, the members respond differently than they had to earlier tracks. It feels fresh, urgent, and it feels in sync with their experiences. Its themes, pressure, and the desire for freedom. It reflects what they've been grappling with throughout the documentary. And the staff members describe the track as embodying this group's essence, even if the members themselves don't fully realize it at the time. And that observation is pretty telling because sometimes identity emerges not from conscious design, but from trusting the process. And for CORTIS, I think this track becomes more than just a potential title track. It's proof that the trial and error and the arguments and the doubts were leading somewhere real. Now, the documentary closes on a quieter note. Back in Korea, the members settle into their new dorm and reflecting about their debut, and they admit to mixed emotions. Some members want their image to remain unpredictable. Other members focus on getting nervous about performing in front of fans or the first time. But the common thread is anticipation. They know debut is close, but not exactly when. And what stands out is how their tone has shifted from the uncertainty of episode 3. They're still nervous, but they sound more grounded. And Martin knows that at first he didn't know what he wanted to express, but through writing, he found it along the way. And that reflection feels like the natural conclusion of this series. Identity isn't handed to them, it's built piece by piece. So yeah, the documentary doesn't end with the polished debut stage or final song reveal. Instead, it ends with the group still in motion. They're hopeful, they're anxious, and they're determined. So it's an honest close that reminds us that this is only the beginning of their story. All right. I don't know if you have watched the documentary. If you have, let me know your favorite moments and tell me what you thought about the documentary and this group. Okay? And when you write comments, let's stay positive, respectful, and classy. Peace and love. Bye-bye.